how common is it exactly to have this misdiagnosis where you walk into a doctor and you come out with a depression diagnosis, and actually what is really going on is you're going through perimenopause or menopause?
From what I hear in my community, it seems to be about 80% of women will be dismissed of looking at hormones, maybe even more, maybe 90. It happens way too frequently. And I hear this story over and over again that my doctor wants to give me medication. I'm not really sure. I think I may be in perimenopause. What do you think? And so we go through each one and try to help them out. But it's great that they're even aware of it, because I think medication, I don't want to poo-poo it, but there's a time and place for it. But I think it's just much too easy for a doctor to prescribe that when perhaps the first call of action should be looking at a woman's hormones first and try to fix that.
Welcome back to the Charlene Giselle Show. Today we have Zora Benhamou with us, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Zora. Zora is a gerontologist, and we will talk about what that is in a moment, a menopause educator, and a menopause biohacker. Zora, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. So the first question on everybody's mind, I'm sure, is what is a gerontologist?
I just love the way you say gerontologist. It's so good because I hear gerontologist and it's a gerontologist, and it just sounds so much better in French. So it actually sounds cool. Most people hear this word and they run because it is associated with aging and older adults, and a lot of people have this ageist, stigma, and so we have a trouble really getting in the message that it's not just about older adults and aging. It's about longevity. It's looking at the whole life course from birth till death. So a gerontologist is somebody who studies aging and longevity. But we don't only look at it from a biological perspective, but we look at it from a psychological perspective and a sociological perspective. And we need to look at the whole life course to understand how people are aging, why we're getting certain diseases. And yes, of course, we do look at older adults as well, and we try to advocate them and their social policy. And so it's quite a big study in a big field, but I love it because it doesn't just go, okay, it's all just about the physiology and what we eat. So there is, I love to bring in my gerontologist hat into the menopause space, because what we know, what helps us through our longevity and aging process will also help us through our menopausal symptoms.
I'm so glad that you're on the show, and I am really impressed by your work. And the reason I wanted to invite you is because many of our listeners are suffering from the symptoms of menopause and or are in perimenopause and or are completely confused about the whole thing. Let's just be honest. And so I thought we would bring some clarity. We will burst some myth, bring a little bit of truth around the topic. So perhaps can we start with the basic? When does one need to start caring about the menopause conversation?
Personally, I think it's when she gets her period, when she starts menstruating, because it's all about hormones and how the cycle and how we lose them hormones throughout the life course as well. So that's a very important point. But I love women to understand their cycle first. If you know where you're at when everything's great and the cycle is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and talking about your menstrual cycle, wonderful. And of course, in the beginning, it's a little wonky for some girls. And then as we get through our 20s and 30s, we also need to understand what is happening, because it's about 35, the age of 35, most women are losing their progesterone. This is a hormone. We have estrogen and progesterone. These are the main sex hormones. They're not only in females, they're also in males. It's just that we have more of these. And we start to lose the progesterone part. Okay, we need them both. And we do, as we hit towards menopause, we lose these hormones. So they take a real steep decline at 35. So if you're not aware of this and you're feeling anxious, you're feeling worried, you're feeling depressed, this may be just because you've lost a little bit of progesterone. And I remember my own self when I was in my mid 30s, for some reason, I was crying it for no reason. I was completely baffled. I was like, I don't know. It's not, nothing triggered it. I was just like, what's going on? Now, retrospect, I wish I knew to just go test my progesterone, because that was one of the symptoms, because progesterone is called the great calmer. This is the hormone that women produce. And it is making us feel relaxed. It makes us feel calm. It makes us feel chill. And estrogen is the one that's more excitatory. It's more about rebuilding, and it's about energy, and it's about focus. And so we like to have them both, because if both, and you can imagine, in extremes is not good. We need to keep them in balance and in a healthy way. So understanding your hormones from day one is really, really important. I wish I knew this when I was much younger. And so if you're still cycling, get an app or track it on a piece of paper. What is your cycle? What's normal for you? 25 days, 28 days, 15 days. I mean, there's all different kinds of things. What's normal for you? Do you have heavy bleeding? You have light bleeding? And then once you start to get through the perimenopause phase, which is, you have premenopause, which is from the day you start your period until you have your perimenopause phase, where you start to lose those hormones. And perimenopause, meaning around the time of menopause, is about, on average, 5 years before you hit menopause, which is a 1-day event. It's when you have 12 consecutive months without your period. It's kind of a ridiculous thing. It's just 1 day. And the average is 5, but it can last around 10. Wouldn't totally not unusual to have 10 years of menopausal symptoms. And if you're not aware of this, you may be going to your doctor and being diagnosed for the wrong thing. So I always like women to understand their hormone, get the hormone piece done first, and then you can go on to other treatments if this is not balancing you out and fixing issues. So we have premenopause, perimenopause, which is if the average age of menopause, when that 12 consecutive months without your period happens in the Western world around age 51, well, then it's around 40, early 40s, let's say, that you are starting to get through this transition. So just being aware of that in your late 30s, 40s is really important. And I know the word menopause is kind of like gerontology. People have a stigma against it. It means you're old. It means you're an old lady. And we have to rebrand this, because menopause, I meet many women in post-menopause, which is the days after that 1-day event, who are looking fabulous, and they're looking amazing. They're living their best life. So we really need to be just aware of menopause, the symptoms, when it can happen.
Mm-hmm. So would it be correct to say that if someone says 35 or 36 and their progesterone is starting to decline quite steeply, would we say that they are perimenopausal because their progesterone has started to decline already, or would that be too early to say?
I don't think it's too early. It's a lot of the times, if you have symptoms and you have the loss of hormones, and it can be just kind of going up and down a little bit. If it's just starting, well, yeah, you're in the early perimenopause phase. So it's not like you're deep into perimenopause unless you do have a lot of these symptoms, and which wouldn't be completely unusual. Then, yeah, you're early perimenopause.
And I think that's in itself a big piece to take away, because it's not very often that you would have a conversation with a woman before her 40th birthday that would be comfortable having the perimenopause talk, right? Is that your experience as well?
Yes. And I just got back from Prague, where I interview women on the street. I just go up to them or in a shop and I ask them 5 questions about menopause. And the most resistance I get are in Latvia, Poland, and in Czech Republic, at least in Prague. This is my experience. And I most of the time, they're just shy, and I'm a stranger. I get it. But in Prague, I would get almost a dirty look and a very offensive energy, as if, how dare you ask me that question? I never experienced that. And so speaking to some younger women about my situation, they said, well, yeah, it's one, they're Czech people are very personal, or they're more introverted. It's part of their culture. You're a stranger, of course, but it is, even if you spoke full Czech, they would still have a reaction of really probably not wanting to share, but that there is this stigma against menopause, that it's almost as if I were saying, hey, you look old, let's interview you. And which was not my intention at all. I've never had that reaction, but I thought it was really interesting. And again, this is not classifying or stereotyping all Czech women. This is just an experience of going up to probably about 25, 30 women in the city of Prague. So in August, I don't know. I don't know if any of those factors tell, but I was a bit surprised. So I think really, yeah, this fact that menopause is associated with older age is a bit of a hurdle for a lot of women.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how can that manifest vis-a-vis performance and vis-a-vis focus and vis-a-vis the workplace? Because we have a lot of professional women listening to the show, and I wonder how that could tie into how they're feeling in their career.
Yes. So if you're hitting perimenopause and you're losing your progesterone and you're starting to lose your estrogen, we have to keep in mind estrogen receptors are all over the body, and there's a lot of them in the brain, and they need estrogens to function. And so if we're starting to lose this, then we may be feeling a little bit of brain fog. Maybe we're searching for words. Maybe our memory isn't as good. We're not as sharp, and we go, oh, I'm getting old. Well, I understand why people may think that, but it could possibly be just because you're starting to lose your estrogen. Now, if you're in your late 40s and mid 50s, well, certainly, yeah, that would be very clear. If you're in your late 30s and early 40s, I'd still look at the hormone piece, and I would test your estradiol levels. I would test your progesterone levels and even your testosterone levels. So in testosterone, women have testosterone, not as much as men, but relatively speaking to the other hormones in our body, we have a lot more testosterone, which is really surprising for a lot of people. So if you're feeling a little sluggish, you don't have that drive and that motivation, then that could possibly be a drop in testosterone. And so testing these hormones and knowing where you're at is crucial. And all you have to do is top up your hormones with a menopause doctor, obviously replenish what they think that maybe you have lost with bioidentical hormones, which are body identical, exactly like our body's producing them, because the whole hormone piece is a huge can of worms. There's so much out there. There's so many options, which is great, but it's very confusing. Do I take compounded, bioidentical, pharmaceutical? Do I take pellets, pills, creams, gels, patches? It's just a wild world out there. But your doctor, having this conversation with your doctor, testing your hormones, knowing where you're at, knowing that you're in the optimal ranges, because the biohacking space, we know that average, the normal, is sick. The average American is sick, for example. When you hit those normal levels in your blood work, it's for a biohacker who wants to optimize their health, it's a little disappointing. To me, it's like getting a C. Okay, I'm all right, but I want an A or a B. So I want to move my ranges into the optimal ranges. And your audience here are high performers, and everybody, I think, likes to be a little healthier than the average person. Then we need to not only test our blood, knowing how to test the blood, because it's not just say, oh, let's just test total testosterone. We need to test the free and bioavailable testosterone, because it doesn't matter what's floating around in your blood. We want to know what's free and available for your body to use. And so this is more of a functional medicine doctor who can look at these things and understand really what's going on and put the pieces together. Because it's not, if you're feeling a little brain fog, if you're feeling a little off, and and you're not performing as well at work, then it could be many things, but understanding not only where do your sex hormones play in this game, but knowing what other biomarkers can we look at to test to see if your brain function is a matter of something else and not just the hormones. But the hormone piece is so simple to fix. It's such a easy thing. And I like to really get that as a foundation. And once that piece is done and you still have issues, well, then at least, having your hormones at an optimal level will support what other treatments that you're getting further on down the line.
And in your experience, Zora, do you think that this perimenopausal stage where we have the decline of progesterone, change of hormonal profile, could be a contributor to increased anxiety, perhaps even increased burnout, signs and symptoms where we feel more and more overwhelmed, where we feel more and more anxious? Can you tell us a bit between perimenopause, menopause, and potential burnout risks as well in female?
Yes, absolutely. I have even a small group of biohacking friends who've tested their 20-year-old daughters, and they're very low in progesterone. So they give them a little cream and they rub it on their arms, and they're feeling much better. So that's one interesting piece. It's not unusual in your 20s to, for some reason or another, lose your progesterone. And this is so when you're considering burnout, what's happening to me, then it could be many things, right? And so I always go back to, I have clients who come to me and they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm really feeling sluggish. I'm feeling tired. I'm just not motivated. My brain is just burnt out. I can't think straight. And I'm feeling sad or whatever, depressed. There's so many other different symptoms that we can feel. And she says, is this hormones? And this woman that I spoke to last, someone whom I'm thinking of right now, is about 52. And I said, well, what's going on in your life? And she said, oh, well, just my boyfriend just left the country and we're going to be having a distance. My job I'm not happy with it. I think I'm going to quit. And then, all these things happening in our life. And I'm, well, with or without hormones, this is going to make you sad. It's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be a breeze. However, without your hormones, then this is a bigger challenge than usual. You used to feel like you could handle some of these things in life, and now you cannot. And that's a clue that maybe you should really be looking at the hormones as well. So it's not only the hormones, but them together. And the loss of hormones plus a stressor that's happening in your life. And what I liken to think that menopause, when we go through this transition, it's a little bit like waking up in the middle of the night with a fear of some kind. And it's so exaggerated in your head. Everything is exaggerated and you're panicking. And what am I going to do? You got this racing mind, which, by the way, is also a progesterone thing, the low progesterone. And you wake up in the morning and the sun is shining and you're like, it's not that bad. It's just, it's just exaggerated in the middle of the night. And that's what it feels like when you're going through this hormonal transition and you're just not able to handle some of the stressors as you were before.
So it makes everything just a little bit harder to handle.
Yes. And but if we're aware of it, then, and if it is a hormone thing, well, go see a hormone doctor, or not a hormone, more of a menopause specialist, because the person will understand the fluctuations, the differences. They'll understand your situation, not just give you an antidepressant and say, get on with your life. They'll really know how to test you. So I encourage, if you are going to go test and try to measure and figure this piece out, don't be shy to go to a menopause or women's hormone specialist, because that person will understand. And even if you're in your mid 30s and you're like, I'm seeing a menopause doctor, I know it can be hard, but that person will understand really what your situation is, because it's kind of like a gerontologist. Yeah, we focus on older adults, but it's the whole life course that matters.
How common is it exactly to have this misdiagnosis where you walk into a doctor and you come out with a depression diagnosis, and actually what is really going on is you're going through perimenopause or menopause?
It happens a lot. I have to say, the stats I don't have in front of me, but from what I hear in my community, it seems to be about in the 80% of women will be dismissed of looking at hormones, maybe even more, maybe 90. It's happens way too frequently. And I hear this story over and over again that my doctor wants to give me medication. I'm not really sure. I think I may be in perimenopause. What do you think? And so we go through each one and try to help them out. But it's great that they're even aware of it, because I think medication, I don't want to poo-poo it, but there is a time and place for it. But I think it's just much too easy for a doctor to prescribe that, when perhaps the first call of action should be looking at a woman's hormones first and try to fix that.
Mm-hmm. And before we talk about ways to fix it with HRT potentially or other hormonal method, are there any holistic lifestyle choices that women can make to optimize their hormone?
Absolutely. So I always say you can't out hormone a bad diet and lifestyle. This goes without saying. As pro hormones as I am, I love to replenish what we have, but you need to get that foundation first. The foundation we always talk about in the biohacking circles is your proper and appropriate nutrition. And you have the movement piece, the exercise piece, you have the sleep and the stress component. We need a community. We have purpose in life. This is all super important to get this foundation, because then your hormones are going to be supercharged. They're going to work even better. And you need this anyways for longevity. We need to make sure we have good sleep hygiene. We prioritize our sleep. We manage our stress. I think stress is one of the biggest levers when it comes to our health and trying to improve it. We need to manage the stress, because you can have the best diet in the world and be running on the treadmill all day long. And if you've got stress that is affecting you, it's your perception of stress, not the stress itself, then it wins. It trumps all. It doesn't really matter, because the stress is too great, and you need to manage that, because it can lead down a lot of other pathways of disease.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And I wonder whether I can play devil's advocate here a little bit, because one thing that I hear very often when it comes to stress is how stressful that is to hear. I'll tell you a story quickly. One of my clients actually came out of the doctor's office and was told about going into menopause. And one of the things that the doctor said was, well, you need to really manage your stress. And she called me screaming, meaning, what do I do about stressing about the stress? Can someone stop telling me to stop stressing, because it's stressing me out? And, she's very busy. She has a huge role at a huge organization, manages a very large team, works on multiple time zones. You can imagine, the archetype of woman I'm speaking of here. And what she was confiding in me was that she gets stressed by being told by professional to not stress. What would you say to that? And how common is this?
Yes. Well, the reason is, because a lot of cascade of hormones are going through your body when you have a perception of stress. It's the perception. Okay. Stress is going to be there. It's fine. Like make stress your friend. That's what we can do in understanding. There's an interesting study that was done that looked at thousands. It was several thousand adults, and asking them about their perception of stress. That, do you believe that stress is bad for you? And then they asked another group, and so some of them said yes, some of them said no, and then in the end they found out who died and what happened, and it was those who believed stress was bad for them they died earlier. I don't remember the stats anymore. It was a great study, and they I mean, and those who didn't believe that they had a lot of stress in their life in the last, couple of years, then those are the people who, and not that they didn't think that stress was bad. It's not that the people who had the stress but didn't think it was as bad lived longer than the people who said, oh, I don't have that much stress in the last year of my life. I'm sorry, I didn't pose those questions perfectly, but I will send you the study. It was a TED talk by, I can't remember her name, but I'll send it to you. It was great. It's called Make Stress Your Friend. And so the whole talk was just about how the perception of stress, we need to figure that piece out, because if you believe it will kill you, well, it kind of will. So again, not another stressful thing to think about, but I totally understand. It's when I interview people who are sleep specialists, they say, well, you could never tell an insomniac how bad sleep deprivation is for them, because they're going to stress out even more, and then they're not going to fall asleep. So you're perfectly right in asking that question. And so that is, for somebody, they're going to hear this. If they're going to worry about it, that's what they're going to focus on, and they're going to stress out even more about it. So they have to understand how to filter this information and then say, okay, all right, I know I have to manage my stress somehow. And that's for them to figure out that component, because if you tell them to meditate, sometimes that's even more stressful to try to meditate than not. But there's a million and one ways to manage our stress. I think one of the best ways to do it is put things in perspective. And what are the thoughts in your head, and how can we really change our perspective of stress or the stressful situation? And I think the game is, it's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to feel anger or fear or whatever it is that's making you upset for a short period of time. We just need to make that window as short as possible and try to go on and continue our lives rather than ruminate on problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And any other holistic tools that you would recommend?
Yes. For the stress, or for menopause, or?
For stress to start with, and then we can look into menopause.
So I'm a big fan of, so apart from the perspective, if you can change the perspective, I think that's very, very powerful. Apart from that, I think breath work is super important. I've done my breath work instruction through the Oxygen Advantage, and I learned so much. I was very scientifically based on understanding what's happening in the body as you're trying to breathe. And I think it's a great tool to have to help you get through the times of stress, because women tend to have a higher stress response, in the sense we may have more upper chest breathing. We may breathing through our mouth. Mouth breathing is not going to be a very efficient way to handle our stress. So we can breathe through our nose. If you can remember anything from this podcast interview, just close your mouth, keep breathing through your nose. I know you did a great podcast, not just recently, all about breathing. And so I'm a big fan of breath work, especially if you are going through a panic attack, or you're just feeling overwhelmed. It takes literally a minute, not even, to calm down the nervous system, to relax the body, to reduce your heart rate, to reduce your blood pressure. It's instantaneously when you learn how to breathe. So that's another tool. And I think some other great tools to use, other than the breath work, because I like the free stuff first. And if you're in the biohacking community, ice bathing is one of those things that sounds like it's a stressor. And for some women it is, or I'm always saying women because that's what my podcast is always focused on, but for men as well. So, but I meet a lot of people who are surprisingly relaxed after and better able to handle stress when they learn how to ice bathe. And I think part of this is you feel really empowered that first time you jump into the cold. So I'm talking about, you jump in, some people are 1 minute, some people are 10 minutes, but you have a lot of fear before you take that first step into an ice bath. And it's the thoughts in your head are creating a heart rate that's elevated. You're feeling very stressed. Once you're taught through an instructor, I'm not saying jump into an ice cold bath by yourself. You're taught through an instructor how to breathe, how to relax, how to get through that 1 minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And you come out of that, you realize that you can control a lot of things. And it was just in your head, this fear. So I think ice bathing is a really cool biohack for understanding stress, perception of stress, and knowing that you have the power to control a lot of things if you can just grasp the thoughts in your head.
I'm a huge ice bath fan, so I'm really glad that you've mentioned that.
Oh, yay. When was the first time you jumped into an ice bath, and what did you feel?
It was 2020, actually. I interviewed my Wim Hof instructor with whom I did my first ice bath on the podcast show a few weeks back, Juan Pablo. And what did I feel? Before going into the ice, apprehension and fear, definitely. I thought, this is very cold. This is really cold. And afterwards, well, you described that feeling of accomplishment and a bit of a, superwoman thing. You just feel, wow, I've made it. I've done it. I can do it. And of course, there are safe and unsafe ways of doing it. So I would definitely recommend to follow the steps and do it with a professional and make sure you get medical clearance and all of that. But it's part of my self-care tool. I continue to do it regularly, and I've noticed that it's really helped me feel more resilient overall.
There you go. I'm so glad. I'm so happy to hear that. Exactly what I see too.
Excellent. Okay, so I love that. Any other biohacking tools or techniques?
So those are some of my favorite. If you like tools, like some people are like, I just need instruction. I need help. I can't do this stuff by myself. Then I love this neuroacoustic software. There's one called Nucalm, Nucalm, and it works really well with a lot of my clients who have trouble recovering, trouble with the stress, trouble sleeping. And have you heard of Nucalm?
No, I have not.
It's an app on your phone, and you have to pay for this service, but it's not that expensive. You can pay month to month, and you listen to the headphones, and they're neuroacoustic software. So there are different wavelengths going in there to try to get your brain from gamma and beta waves. I think it's beta waves, and then you go into the alpha, and then you go to the theta. Okay, and we want theta brain waves to be able to feel calm and relaxed. And so it's doing this without you really knowing it. And you just relax for, there's journeys of 25 minutes up or 20 minutes until 8 hours if you want. And you can sit there and you go through this, what they call a journey, and you really feel relaxed. I call it meditation without effort. And especially for those who have struggled with it, I found that it's so much easier. And it felt like the moment my brain starts to think other thoughts, it comes right back in. And what you hear is music, and the music kind of changes and it goes, and it's not the music that's supposed to make you feel calm and relaxed. It's the neuroacoustics that's happening under the music. The music's there just to mask sounds that would be like you would not like those sounds. So they mask those sounds with the song that you're hearing. And so and different journeys have different things, not just music. So it really is a cool tool that if it's equivalent, like say you had a really bad night's sleep and you only slept, 4 or 5 hours, and you go, oh my God, I'm going to have a horrible day at work. Of course, that's your thought in your head, but you program yourself for that. And so what you do is you listen to the Nucalm, and in a 30-minute session, it's like recovering 2 hours of deep sleep. And we know deep sleep is really important for recovery and feeling more energetic in the morning. So I'm a really big fan of Nucalm, and it's a simple tool that we can all try. If you can't do all the free stuff and you can't get yourself to learn how to breathe and you don't have an ice bath, and try the Nucalm. It's really a really cool tool.
I will make sure to add it in the show notes and try it myself as well.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And now that we've tackled that stress component, I was wondering if we could have a look at the crossroad between stress and sleep and menopause. The reason I'm asking that question is because my typical female client will tell me that she's hit by a triple wave. Number one, the wave of stress that comes over her at night, mostly from all the work and pressure and all the deadlines and all the email that she hasn't answered yet. And you're there lying in bed and it's 1 a.m. and you're staring at the ceiling. then you start to develop maybe some hot flushes because you're going through menopause and it's all sticky and uncomfortable. And then it's affecting your sleep. And now you are worrying about the fact that tomorrow is going to be crap because you haven't slept. So that is a story that I hear very, very often. So it's where stress meets anxiety, meets lack of sleep, meets menopause. Zora, help us.
If this person is anywhere over the age of 35, I would say hormones. It's so typical. It's such a same story I hear over and over again. And so the hormones. So it doesn't mean you have to take hormone therapy. Okay. Just saying it's likely that your hormones, when you start feeling a hot flash, it's a clear indication estrogen is pretty much out the door. And when you have ruminating thoughts at night, racing mind, that's a clear indication that your progesterone is out the door. So that's why you just go and test, figure it out, and then you can replenish. It's the fastest, easiest, most proven method ever. So for those women who say, I don't want to take hormone therapy for one reason or another, or cannot, then we can look at we got to do other hacks. I still recommend good sleep hygiene and stress management. And of course, everything that we talked about in addition to those hormones. It's just that I've seen them work so well. It's really hard to not talk about them because it's life changing. And so if you can replenish the hormones, great. And then you can take your time doing all the other stuff too. But if you don't, well, then having the stress management techniques that we talked about already, plus good sleep hygiene. And you can also play around with adaptogens and supplements and even peptides. And so there's other things you can definitely try. It's just that the science and research hasn't shown it across the board to be great, for everyone. Right. So it's one of those things. I hear some women love ashwagandha. Other ones love the rhodiola. Some women like Vitex. There's maca. It depends on what your symptom is. But generally for those have worked pretty well. Trying to think what in terms of course, getting a good diet and lifestyle. Some women find that hot flashes can be triggered by alcohol, by caffeine, by spicy food, by hot food, hot soups, hot teas. So understanding what is triggering a hot flash and stress can trigger these hot flashes too. So if there's somebody toxic in your life, you need to try to manage that person out of your life so that you can get a good night's sleep. And so having those tools are really, really great as well, because hormone therapy isn't for everybody. I don't want to bully anyone into doing it. I would love women to read more about it, to understand their hormones and understand where hormone therapy is today versus in the past, and educate yourself. And when you read and you educate, you're going to come to the conclusion that's best for you. And so I really want women to also follow their intuition, no matter what people say. Mm-hmm. I think women's intuition is part of their superpower. So those are some of the hacks, the new calm as well. There's a couple of other cool gadgets. I don't know if we're in the biohacking circle. If you want to track, because biohackers love to test, measure, and assess. And if tracking stresses you out, don't do it. If people standing on a scale and looking at your weight stresses you out, makes you have a bad day or good day, don't do it. But we like to have these gadgets like an Oura ring or a BioStrap or the Apple Watch, or there's so many tools out there that you can use to measure your day-to-day stress. How are you sleeping? Then you can say, you know what, I'm going to do a little experiment where for a week I'm not going to drink alcohol. And then you can see your heart rate variability probably go up. You probably have better sleep scores. And you just keep tweaking and experimenting. You can experiment with supplements that you take. You can experiment with a new protocol or certain diet, and you track and measure and you see how you're doing. Because sometimes it's hard to dial in and feel. I love to teach women to say, okay, how are you feeling? What's going on inside? Let's get in. But a lot of people don't know. And so sometimes seeing some data on a phone or a tracker, they go, oh, actually, I do feel like that. I do feel better, or I do feel worse. And that's what I love gadgets. So I don't know if you have an Aura ring
Oh,
yourself.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And there are many
I've had
more
it for a
out
long
there.
time.
There's so many out there, actually, rings that are coming out there. I mean, Aura was the first. And then there's something called Science Beat. And then there's Human, I don't know, I can't remember what it is. I'm getting one soon because they're sending it to me. So I'm like, oh, wow. And these different ones, so the Science Beat one measures inflammation. The new one that I'm getting, I should really know the name, but I'll give it to you later. You can put it in the show notes. And that one measures supposedly inflammation, of course, the sleep and the stress scores and all that, but also your insulin levels. How
That's
your
interesting.
or insulin, it says it can measure insulin resistance. Okay, because only measure insulin, you have to take a blood test or something, or have the CGM monitor. I'm not really sure how they're doing it, but I was reading up on it. I was like, ooh, this is really cool. So I think those gadgets are moving forward and evolving and changing, and there's just so much out there that and prices are changing too. So the more competition there is, then the more affordable they are.
And since we just talked about glucose, I think that brings us very nicely to a topic that I really want to talk about in the context of perimenopause and menopause, is the importance of nutrition and the interconnection between nutrition and hormones. Could you shed some light on that?
Yes. So when we go through this perimenopause transition, many women start to develop insulin resistance. That means they don't process the high carbohydrate foods that we used to be able to handle when we were younger. So they will report that they have the same diet, same lifestyle, same exercise, and they're gaining weight, particularly around the middle. And if you were to test their blood sugar levels and their insulin, you'll find out that, yes, they are becoming more insulin resistant. And so we want to become more insulin sensitive. And we can change that. But now we have to be aware of it. And the big mistake that I see women in my community make is, oh, I'll just go back to what used to work. I'll eat less and exercise more. And that rarely works. And they become even bigger, and then it's even more frustrating. So we need to find the right foods that are working for us. And I'm diet agnostic. I've seen women thrive on so many diets. I don't want to demonize any kind of food or anything. It's your job as a biohacker to figure out what works for you. And that's through testing, measuring, and assessing. So let's figure out, we can say, well, okay, for insulin resistance, what should we do? We can try to reduce those high refined carbohydrates. We still need carbohydrates to create hormones because we want to create as much as we can, as long as we can. So we do need to eat things like sweet potatoes or quinoa or whatever it is that you don't have an allergy to as well. So we want to keep those carbohydrates mostly from fiber, from high fiber foods, from fruits and vegetables, for example. But again, is this working for you or not? That's your job to figure it out. We can say, look, we can start here. We try to get more protein in, get more satiety, try to get a little bit more fat, not overdo the fat, because I see a lot of women also going through this keto phase and they're eating so much fat. Like, well, it's a little bit too much. Like, we do have some limitations as well. So we want to find out the diet that really works for us. And usually in my community with the women I work with, it's getting adequate amounts of protein, which is really hard. I always say eat protein like it's your job. And a good place to start is about 1 gram of protein per pound of desired body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds and you want to get to 130, well, then you eat 130 grams of protein. And another simple way to do it as well is try to get protein every meal. That's what I start women with, because they can get overwhelmed in grams and how much, and I don't know. Just get the protein in 3 times a day if you can. Don't do this 1 meal a day thing. It's rarely works in the women that I see. And unless you're treating some kind of a problem, if you have a health issue and that's been recommended, that's fine. But generally, we want to get enough protein. I like to get 30 grams for breakfast, 30 grams for lunch, and 30 grams for dinner. And then, of course, that there's and when I'm thinking about animal protein, for me is key. Organ meats is even better, and of course you can mix that up with vegetable proteins as well. So getting your protein in, you're going to get really satiated. You're not going to be overeating things that probably not working for you. Getting lots of fiber, vegetables is like so important on so many levels. So get your vegetables in. That's going to also keep you satiated. It's going to help detox the estrogens in your body as well, because we need to make sure that those are safely detoxed. And then you get your healthy fats in there too. For fun, it tastes better, and we need that for the brain. We need it for a lot of other functions in the body. So getting that balance is really, really good. And if you were to track this, if you like tracking things, I would say, okay, just track 3 or 4 days on something like an app called Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, and you just see where you're at, where are your macros. I don't like counting calories, but I like counting macronutrients and seeing what works best for you, playing around, especially with those, the carbohydrates, the fats, and the proteins. You can start with trying to get them equally balanced. And then if that doesn't work, then you can say, all right, I'm going to play around with more protein or less fat or higher carb or lower fat. It doesn't really matter. Just do your own experiment. But I find that helps a lot of women with the insulin resistance, because diet is such a key player. And then exercise is just, it's the magic pill for everything, and trying to get exercise regularly. And again, what does that mean? It's different for each person. It means that you move on a regular basis, first of all. Now, if you've been sedentary for a long time, just going for a 15 or 20-minute walk is a starting point. But if you're already there, well, then let's try to get strength training. We can eat protein, but we're not going to build those muscles if we don't exercise them. We need to tear them a bit so that they can repair and grow bigger. So we need to get any kind of strength training exercises, preferably lifting something pretty heavy, doing 5 to 8 sets, not this whole 15, 30 rep thing. And usually with a trainer who can help you get the right form so you don't injure yourself. And then HIIT training, high intensity interval training, is another great tool to have women use, because I often see when they're in my generation, and particularly, we have been on the chronic cortisol, chronic cardio track. Chronic cardio means you've been, let's run for an hour. Let's do 3 hours of aerobic classes back to back and trying to burn the fat. Well, that's just going to keep our cortisol so high. Cortisol loves body fat, especially in the belly. So it not only comes from chronic cardio exercise, but it also comes from the stress. So this is why also managing the stress is a great thing to help insulin resistance. So these are just a few tools that you can use to get through. And again, to lower the cortisol, the last component when it comes to exercise is doing something calming, relaxing. It can be yoga or Pilates or walking in nature, walking on the beach, forest bathing. These kind of things will bring the cortisol down as well. And what I like about the HIIT training is that it's short bursts, and it's up and then down, up and then down. And that's why you're not in this chronic cardio state. So getting that well-rounded, I think, will really, really help with the insulin resistance.
I'm really glad that you've spoken about strength training, because it's one that I was late to include in my own routine. I love cardio and I love yoga, so I had that pretty dialed in, but strength training, I felt like I had to be forced into it a little bit. And it's probably one of the most fundamental. It's just so important, but I don't think that it's spoken of enough. Yeah. So I'm just really happy that you brought it to our listeners' attention. What do you think is a good amount of time or duration for an efficient start in a strength training journey if somebody is listening and doesn't currently lift weight?
Well, it depends on one, how much time you have, what else you're doing. Some people are chronic cardio people and they love their runs and sometimes their heart's into it. So I don't want to take that away. Uh, I would say start with once a week. I mean, just as a start, if you've never done this before, get a personal trainer, try to learn how to lift heavy and then build up to 2 times a week and 3. And I think that's plenty. 2 to 3 times a week is a really good place to sit. And as you are growing and you are learning, because in the beginning, you're going to lift a weight and it's heavy and it's like baby weights and you're like, it's really hard. Well, then with the proper training, you're going to stack on bigger weights and then you're going to get better form. You're going to get stronger. You're going to see those weights are going to be a little just too light for you. You need to build up to it. So it's not something you jump in and I say lift heavy. Well, no, you've got to build up to it. And so I think 2 to 3 times a week of strength training is, at least in my community, this has been working for most of our women.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I think there is something to it that is psychological as well. It's super satisfying. That's why I got into it, right? At first, I was reluctant. I'm a bit of a chronic cardio, I have to confess. But there is something really empowering about strength training that you feel so good about.
It is. It is empowering. And the women when I was in Phuket, actually you're in Thailand now, and I was in Phuket for a health retreat where I was bringing women there. And I do remember some of the women there never strength trained in their life. And we also got them into kickboxing. They felt so empowered, so strong. So they didn't realize they had this strength inside them. And they just had these big smiles on their face. Like, I didn't think I could even do that. And now they've just loving it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important to talk about. And can I ask you, you brought that up and I think it's really key. I don't hear that too often, but when is chronic cardio more damaging than good? Is there a dial somewhere to calibrate? And I'm also really interested here because I'm a bit of an avid runner and I'm thinking, I probably need to hear this.
Yes.
So I'm being really transparent. This is also for my own benefit.
What I would do if I were you is get a biological age test kit, because the people who are marathon runners, who are chronic cardio people, they tend to have a very high biological age, right? We have chronological age, which is the number of years on your candles, on your birthday cake. And we have then our chronicle age, which is the age that our organs and our body is actually at. And you will see people who tend to have a lower chronicle or age, younger age, they also tend to look younger too. And so if you look at runners or athletes, professional athletes, they're really aged. Their body has gone through a lot of stress. So it's one of those things. First I would tell you to do that. Just, I love data. I mean, I love getting that. And then there are plenty of biological test kits out there. And then the other thing I would do is women, as you go through the perimenopause transition, very often will notice we're not recovering like we used to. So we could get away with a lot of chronic cardio. Whether it's good for you or bad for you is debatable. But once we hit in our 40s, then we really need to step back and think, am I really recovering? And I'm one of these people, I'm super guilty. I'm an overtrainer and I would just push through it. I'm like, so what? You have some muscle soreness, like just go through. And I wish I paid attention more to my body, because I think it was sending signals like, you need to chill out. But I was used to 1 day recovery. That's it. Like for me, it was in my head that 1 day. I don't care how I feel or not feel. It was there. So I think giving yourself some time, recovery is super important. We need strong recovery. It's not just exercising all the time. If you don't recover, you're doing more damage than good. And the same thing when you do chronic cardio, that's the problem, is that it keeps going on and on. The body can never have a chance to recover. So you have to figure out, dialing in, how do you feel? What do you like? Because if people tell you, oh, just cut that out completely, it's bad for you to run a marathon, and that brings you joy, then that's ripping something apart from you that that is really beneficial for your health, that joy, that vitamin J. So but there's a balance. There's a real balance. So I think when it comes to the chronic cardio stuff, we do need this for our heart, right? If you don't like HIIT training and prefer running the treadmill or doing other things, that's fine. I went through the Dr. Stacy Sims Menopause for Athletes course. Do you know Dr. Stacy Sims? She's brilliant.
I've heard of her.
She's brilliant. And so what she taught us was, because she's dealing with a lot of women who are like me, just overtrainers and like to exercise, that we need to recover more. But she would say, if you're going to do the hard cardio stuff, once or twice a week is plenty. That's what she would say. Now, again, that's just a starting point. That's just what one person says. You have to decide. Are you getting injured more? Are you tired more? Are you not motivated as you used to get your workouts? Are you not performing as well in your workouts? These are all clues that you could be overdoing it. It's also a clue that you're probably losing your estrogen and your progesterone and your testosterone too. So again, you have to weigh, how much is this and how much is that? I don't know, but that's for you to figure out. But it is probably from those two sources.
Thank you. That is so useful. Zora, I would like for you to just take us home by giving one advice that you wish you had given your younger self, something you wish you had known that you know now, but you didn't know before, that could be beneficial to our listener.
I think, like I said, the first thing that popped in my head is learn how to recover. Learn how to find the balance between exercising enough and getting enough training, and then knowing when to stop and relax. And that's dialing into your body. I think I was not trained to train like a woman. I was trained to train like a man. Exercise is all the formulas when you want to get into any kind of sport or exercise or bodybuilding, it's all on a male model. It's not following our cycle. It's not understanding that we have times where we need to eat a little more carbohydrates, need to relax a little bit more, maybe not push it so hard. And that has a lot to do with our cycle. So I think if I could go back, I would learn how to train like a girl.
That's good to know. Thank you. And then continue to train like a woman post-menopause.
Yes.
And embrace every seasons of being a woman.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Zora. How would you like our audience to connect to your world?
They can come to hackmyage.com. I have a free quiz where you can see where you are on your peri, or post-menopause journey. And I have a lot of free information there as well. We have a membership group, a private women's only group called the Biohacking Menopause. If you want to have a little bit more attention, it's a great way to meet other women in the community as well. So everything is on hackmyage.com.
Excellent. I'll add that to the show notes. I'm so glad we've had this conversation, and I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you for spending your time with me today and listening to this episode. Remember to subscribe so that you can receive weekly updates. And if today's message resonated with you, please remember to share it with a friend, a colleague, or a loved one who could really benefit from this episode.